This time he did not go away. He was caught and got rid of. He died, abandoned. We are not therefore commenting on a single statement and spinning out a special exegesis. We are trying to understand his experience and asking whether eventually our experience agrees with the fundamental attitude we detect in his words and deeds. He was constant with that message. He lived up to it and he preached it. Me merimnate, Matthew 6:25 through 34, Luke 12:11 and 22. Do not be anxious about the future. Be carefree. Do not think beforehand what you are to say. Matthew 10:19. In this connection, it seems appropriate to report a moving scene which reveals the humanity of Jesus. It is not the question of an omniscient being just to elicit repentance for Peter's betrayal, whoever may have written the passage, and whatever may be its historical degree of reality. We refer, of course, to the question after breakfast, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than all else? NEB, or more than these. John 21:15. He was to go away even if he is risen, and he just begs for love, for human love. He can leave if he is reassured about being loved. He does not ask, Simon of John, have you understood my message? Have you realized who I was? Even the reference to not being able to go where he would like to go and do what he had dreamt of doing has an autobiographical and prophetic tone. I leave it all to love, and not to my will or to programs of any sort. I have to go. I simply go and leave you with a question. Have I elicited your love? Those who, like Peter, are not sure of yourselves because of the many betrayals, but still love me, to you I entrust my message. He behaved truly as a servant and as a Pantocrator. He was not exposing Christian doctrine, but trying to understand a human experience. We can only do this if we do not divorce the alleged author of those words from his life and his sharing in the human condition along with us. The experience. The question we are asking is whether we can understand that utterance without minimizing or diluting it, but also without making it and similar statements supernatural declarations of a superhuman consciousness. I ask myself, a normal person, how can I understand what goes on in a human heart uttering those words? Do we not call him our brother and friend, as he told us? I am not in the same situation, and few feel called to perform such a guru role, although in any family and loving atmosphere such a situation is thinkable and possible. But I may try to articulate that experience. I should go otherwise, the Spirit will not come. I should not care about perpetuating my life, since unless I go, life will not continue and be passed on to others. Otherwise, all that I have been, felt, experienced, loved, and seen will remain barren and descend with me into the tomb. I am not the private proprietor of my life, that life which has been bestowed upon me. If I cling to it, life will not flow, not live. I should not hanker after immortalizing myself or be worried that my projects, ideas, ideals be strictly followed and observed according to my desires. There is dynamism in life. There is the spirit of truth which I myself may be able to set free from me. This spirit will pervade others by herself and on her own initiative without my having to pre-plan it. This is freedom. Where the Spirit is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. This lived experience, we said, represents a truly liberated soul, a more difficult experience to attain than that of being called to partake in the divine nature, 2 Peter 1:4. It implies having reached a total transparency and having transcended both the burden of the past and the fear of the future. I leave many of my projects undone, many of my aspirations unfulfilled. I may die young, and even if blessed with years of life, the more I live, the more I discover what I could have done and still could do. At any rate, the tasks in and of the world are not yet finished. Did I dream to finish them? Have I not learnt that Lao Tse, Socrates, Shankara, Kant, Gandhi, my mother, to put disparate examples, all departed, but not their spirit? To be a man is to be unique for the time being, and leave the work to others. I know that I shall go, but it takes time to learn that I should go. Eternity is not a long or indefinite time. Eternal life is not go on on living into the future. The first Mahavakya looks somehow at the past. The Father is before me, more powerful than myself, the source. The second statement concerns somewhat the present. We are of the same nature, we are one, our link is life-giving. It is my own existence. This third utterance is directed towards the future and the overcoming of its grip on us. I should go. I certainly shall go away, and I do not regret it. I do not hanker after a desired immortality, after a prolongation of my existence, not even of my ideals, thoughts, plans, projects. If one loves unto the end, John 13:1, one trusts the loved ones. I do not want to freeze the flow of life which comes from the Father and will go on. I share in that life. I participate in this adventure. I do not need heavy luggage. Consummatum est. The Spirit will come, even if I do not send her, even if I do not have power over her, and it is not me who sends her. She will come. The Spirit and the nymph say, Come. Apocalypse 22:17. And we who hear respond, Come. To be sure, I may not be able to live up to that intuition always, but I cannot deny that I truly know it, in an experiential sense, if I live a truly authentic life without any ego. There is then an egoless force, power, exousia, within me which sends the Spirit into the world. It is the Spirit which I succeed in identifying with when my heart is pure. There is still more if I do not go away. The Paraclete will come. We leave unexamined who or what this one called alongside, this comforter, consoler, advocate, intercessor, called upon, invoked, is. I sum it all up with the traditional word of spirit. If I cling to my life, my ego, my mission, my task, my ideal, or obviously worse, my possessions, my family, people, world, if I do not let it all go, if I do not renounce any desire of prolonging my life, even if I call it immortality, and insist on building monuments to my creations, and yearn to set in order what has cost me so much effort to produce, so that it may not all be lost, life will be stifled. I am transient, or rather, I share in the perichoresis, in the dance of the entire universe, in the constant rhythm of all, in the Trinitarian or cosmotheandric display of reality. This is perhaps the most striking experience of Jesus, to be carefree, not to be anxious about the future, to learn from the flowers that today they bloom and tomorrow will have faded away, to renounce dreaming about the future and living a life always projected into the future, thus missing the tempeternal moments of our human existence. I can well understand the man of Nazareth feeling sadness but not concern, pain but not despair, and a deep serenity not without joy, feeling that it is good that he goes away, that he has lived and lived life to the full, and that others will perform even better works than he himself if they can trust the Spirit in every one of us. Yeshua HaNazari, Jesus of Nazareth, is leaving. We all are leaving. He does not find anything nor start any religion. He does not perform the role of a master, a title he did not like. His name has come, and there he goes, having fulfilled his mission, which did not appear to be precisely a grand success. His only testament is his spirit. The assumption of my human condition, the realization that my time is over and that I should go away, the conviction that the Spirit should not be stifled nor controlled or directed, this is the supreme experience which is at the same time the most common human experience. The Son of Man does not want exceptions or privileges. This is the ultimate test. I shall go. I have to go. The ego will die making room for the Spirit. This is life and resurrection. 3. Christ's mysticism. Jesus said to his disciples, Make me a comparison. Tell me what I am like. Simon Peter said to him, You are like a righteous angel. Matthew said to him, You are like a man who is a wise philosopher. Thomas said to him, Master, my mouth will not at all be capable of saying what you are like. Jesus said, I am not your master, because you drank and became drunken from the bubbling spring which I have measured out. And he took him and went aside, and spoke 3 words to him. Now when Thomas came back to his companions, they asked him, What did Jesus say to you? Thomas said to them, If I tell you one of the words which he said to me, you will take up stones and cast them at me, and a fire will come forth from the stones and will burn you up. The Coptic Gospel of Thomas, 13. B.M. Metzger's translation. 1. Eva me sutam. Thus have I heard that there was a man who came into the world and realized that he was one with the origin of the universe, although he was not the origin, that he had come from that source, and to the source he was to return, that meanwhile, in the intervening time allotted to him, he passed his life doing good, although without performing anything pre-planned or truly extraordinary, even if all he did was intense, achieved, authentic, a just man who walked around and did not join any extremist group, seemed to be condoning everything except hypocrisy, and although he did not make discriminations, he seemed to take the side of the oppressed and downtrodden, and as such he finished his life. He saw the originating everything and suffered the impact of the forces of evil, but had an unlimited confidence in the blowing of that wind which he called spirit, pervading everything, so that this was his only legacy. He saw himself as a man, son of man, Barnasha, he called himself, and for this very reason discovered for himself and for others that his humanity was nothing else than the other side of divinity. Inseparable though distinct, so distinct that he was painfully aware of the existence of sin, yet inside himself, as inside every human being, he saw not evil but the kingdom of heaven, that he preached and lived. His birth was obscure, most of his life he passed in the penumbra, and his death was still more obscure. Yet he did not feel frustration of any kind, and when tempted by power he despised it, and when he failed he dared to promise his real presence not only through the Spirit, but also through ordinary food and drink. He left a force, power, love, words, which he said were not his own. He did not elaborate any doctrinal system. He spoke the language of his time. I have heard something else. I have heard 20 centuries of meditations on that man and scores of doctrinal systems of all types. I cannot ignore them. And on the other hand, I cannot study all of them. Great minds have given us stupendous synthesis. I have learnt from many of them, but then I have heard also from other extraordinary human figures of the past, and even the present. Sanctity, to use this word, may be a rare plant, but it grows in all climates and times. I have heard also painful competitions and biased comparisons, mostly by followers and epigones. I have been almost forced sometimes to take sides and make personal decisions. A heard word has come to my rescue, who is not against you is for you. Luke 9:50, Mark 9:40. Although contrary statements, Matthew 12:30, Luke 8:3, have saved me from literal readings and interpretations out of context, the you of the community is not the me of the risen one. I heard also that we cannot do without the power of discernment, and this has led me to discover the primacy of the personal experience, in order to reach what another tradition knows as nitya anitya vastu viveka, discernment between things temporal and eternal, which may be re-echoed in a famous work by a now almost forgotten P. Nuremberg. Having to rely on myself, I had to work towards the purification of my whole being, and this ever unfinished task has liberated me from any sort of absolutization of my convictions. I have heard so many things that I had to listen more attentively to the Spirit. Iti pasyami. Thus do I see that Jesus' inner life discloses a universal experience. History shows it, but even I, intensity and purity apart, am capable of understanding and reenacting that experience. In fact, every man is able to do this, although the language and indeed the doctrines may be very different, even mutually irreconcilable. I am not adopting a dialectical posture, affirming that I do not hesitate to say I am God, because God said I am man. This would be wrong. I am describing my experience in a more intimate and personal way. I simply feel that the divine is in me and I in that divine reality, that I experience that oneness which makes my life truly real. Yet I equally realize how far I still am from that fulfillment. In a paradoxical way, the closer I believe to be to that ideal, the farther away I feel from it. And when I look around and into human history, I understand the anguished question: how many are those who reach salvation, fullness, realization? Perhaps the door opens at the last minute. I do not know. Is it all annihilation, emptiness? The kenosis of the Son of Man is not his privilege. It was not because he was humble, it was because he was man. It is perhaps one of the most pregnant manifestations of the human condition. We are all kenotic, emptied of the divinity which indwells in each one of us. We are all divested, as it were, of our most authentic garb. We all, having divine origin and having temples of the divinity, appear not only to others, but also to ourselves as mere slaves, subject to suffering and death, failure and ignorance. He did not hide it. Only a divine person can reveal such humanity. And yet I see much more than this. I behold, although I am clumsy at manifesting it, that not just his life, but also my life has an infinite value, precisely because it is finite in its shape and name. It is unique and thus incomparable. It cannot be compared, put on any equal footing with anything. It is in my finitude, in my concreteness, the consciousness of my contingents, that I touch cum tangere the infinite, the divinity. I see that the man of Galilee lived that human condition of mine because he shared it. It is this sense of uniqueness which makes my dignity. Nothing and nobody can replace me because my place in the entire universe is irreplaceable. This is the mystery of man. The Son of Man shows to me that I have to realize myself also as a Son of Man, just as man. Many people tend to identify themselves with the role they perform: citizen, politician, worker, medical doctor, peasant, parent, spouse. More subtle still are the religious identifications: Christian, Buddhist, monk, priest, or spiritual roles like those of a saint, guru, sannyasin, and the like. We should by all means be good individuals and perform our duties, but all these performances do not exhaust my being. They do not touch the core of what I ultimately am, a microcosm of the entire reality, an offspring of the Satpurusha, an image, a complete image of the divinity. I know the All, the Father, Brahman, God, and at the same time, I am a spark, the sun, Atman, creature, the thou of the I by virtue of the Spirit. The man Jesus, as I see him, realized this union, henosis, as Origen called it, or anacrasis, distinguishing it from the hypostatic communion at the Incarnation, which he called koinonia, Contra Celsum 3:41. Completely human and fully divine, as the first councils formulated it, and this is the divine facet of the human condition common to all of us, including Jesus the Christ, of course. Indeed, we do not need to denigrate ourselves because we want to exalt him. Without him we would not know it, we would not even realize it. He is the Son, the head, the cause, the Savior. But again here he, like the kingdom that comes and is already here, does not appear with ostentation and fanfare. Even more, he, the mystery, which Christians cannot but call Christ, has a supername, which may be reenacted by so many names which we do not know, nor need to know. Lord, when did we see you? 3. Satpurusha. The mysticism of Jesus Christ is simply human mysticism. What else could it be? It is the ultimate experience of man precisely as man. This word stands not for an individual or a specimen of a human species, but for the fullness of what we all are. We speak of divinization, but this could be an alienation if one ceases to be man. We may believe in annihilation, but this may become an evasion if one abandons what one truly is. We may accept our humanness, but this may be also synonymous with passive acceptance of our defeat if we demean what we truly are, or fall into a flat homocentrism closed to any self-transcendence. His experience, I dare say, was the pure human experience, transcending all particularities without denying them. Only by being concrete we can be universal. His experience was not that of being a male, a Jew, let alone a Christian, a member of a class, caste, party, or religion, but just a man, son of man. This was his kenosis, and thus the possibility to speak to us all from the bottom of our true humanness, or in whatever name we want to express the authentic core of what we truly are. And paradoxically enough, the more we divest ourselves of all attributes and roles, the more we are ourselves, and discover us to be completely human and more divine. Since we are human, we, as individuals, have to go. All have gone, including Jesus. Since we are divine, at our going the Spirit will come. We do not leave reality orphan of our presence. We have been forever. All this may be incompatible with a rigid monotheism. We are not God, only God is God, but Christ is the Son of God, one with the Father, because the divine mystery is sheer gift, donation, or, in traditional words, the Son is begotten and the Spirit proceeds from the source. The entire universe is involved in the process. The entire reality, in Christian language, I discovered half a century ago, is Father, Christ, and Holy Spirit, which later on I called the cosmotheandric experience. From this experiential level, if a Shaivite or any other person should tell me that one does not need Jesus, or even the name of Christ, I would unhesitantly reply, but of course not. Let him go. Do not cling to him. John 20:17, to that name or that symbol, otherwise the Spirit will not come to teach us all truth, which unveils to us that nobody has the monopoly of the personal realization. It is fitting that he goes both for Christians and the others alike. Why do you call me good? John 18:19. The Father is greater than me. John 14:28, or, as Marius Victorinus said after converting from Neoplatonism to Christianity around 360, the Father is to the Son as nothingness to being, as homeon to hoon. In the kenosis of our ego rises precisely what we truly are. Any word we use is charged with unavoidable connotations, but if I try to describe the mysticism of Jesus the Christ, I will not be able to put it without words. The Purusha is all, says one Vedic Rig Veda 10:92. It all depends on how we interpret it. Cosmic man, divine man, perfect humanity, etc., ecce homo, said Pilate. John 19:5, Purushottama, highest man, Bhagavad Gita 8:1, 10:15, and 15, 18 through 19, is the supreme divine form. Paramam, Rupam, Aishvaram, says the Gita. 11:3-9. If I were to say that Jesus Christ is the one who fully realized his human condition, this would be just a phrase, if not spelt out by saying that this is also our destiny, and it should be a very limiting statement if explained outside its proper context. The Paramam Purusham Divyam, divine highest man, says again the Gita 8:8-10. We are touching ineffability. We cannot understand mysticism in the third person. We cannot do it in the second person either. But the first person has to have a partner to speak to if it has to break the silence. This partner cannot be an imaginary reader. It has to be a thou, an Ishtadevata, who then turns the tables on me and converts me unto a thou. Silence is then the final experience which reveals that the word comes out of silence by the power of love. Epilogue. Is this the seed of a new Christology? It would be no wonder that to a new epoch in world history should not correspond a new understanding of Jesus the Christ, understanding which is not brought about by mere rehearsal of traditional doctrines, a necessary condition, however, but by a new life in Christ, by that fide occulata which keeps not looking up to heaven like the men of Galilee, but reenacts the incarnatio continua of which also the ancients Eckhart spoke. The healthy reaction of a Christology from below, represented by the liberation theology, needs the complement of a Christology from within, which at the same time acts as a bridge with the Christology from above. The three are needed. Without spousing an adoptionist Christology, God adopts Jesus as his son, nor a pneumatic one. A spiritual divine being took flesh in a point of history. In the beginning of time was not Jesus, but an arche. At the tempeternal origin was the Alpha and Omega, which Christians call Christ. Were I to go on putting labels, I would speak of a Christophany from the center, which should be distinguished from the so-called Christocentrism. I would remind Christians that lex orandi, lex credendi, and the others, that those liturgical hymns were not just poetical licenses, but theocosmological insights. Bellarmino, after all, was right when defending against Galileo that we cannot have pure science without an underlying cosmology, defective as the cosmology of his time was. Jesu redemptor omnium, quem lucis ante origenem, param paternae gloriae, pater supremus editit, tu lumen et splendor patris, tu spes perennis omnium. Latin Liturgy of Christmas, Vespers. Jesus, Redeemer of all, whom before light's origin, equal to the Father's glory, the Supreme Father gave birth you. Light and splendor of the Father, you everlasting hope of all. In spite that the same hymn sings of the day currens per anne circulum, and that in the Lauds hymn Christ is again called Beatus Auctor Saeculi, originator of, who gives increase to, the temporal ages. The Western modern reception has been by and large to read those texts within a linear conception of time. We could understand them also, more in tune with the great Christological texts of Scripture, within a different temporal scheme. Since the very beginning, at the origin, and arche in principio, reality was, is, Father, Christ, Spirit, to use Christian names, and when the fullness of times came, what we call incarnation took place, and also time, so that the manifestation, phanerosis, of Jesus is a revelation of reality of what we are. Let us remember that if we do not make of God an anthropomorphic and composite being, the revelation of God can only be God himself, and not just an outburst of his mind. The Logos of God is God, says the Trinitarian insight. The mystery of time is the unfolding, the distension, Augustine would say, of the Trinity ad extra. But outside God there is nothing. The entire reality, and not only an exclusively transcendent God, is Trinity. I began by describing the Sitz im Leben of this study which triggered these reflections. I should end by referring to another, wider Sitz, the field of our overall human situation in the socio-political, economico-spiritual predicament of three-quarters of those whom we still call our human fellow beings. What has a Christology to say to all those who will not make it? Venceremos, we shall win, is a powerful psychological shot, but to the thousands, nay millions of victims who perish on the way to an each time more problematic promised land is either wishful thinking or an alienated drug. We have to go deeper and owe an answer to the Amheres, the Dalit, downtrodden, and not only economically or politically, but also spiritually and humanly. The socio-political implications of this vision should be clear, that man, Jesus Christ, shatters all our dualism. Qui fecit utraque unum, sings the liturgy, and yet this unum is neither philosophical monism nor theological monotheism. The diakaisene of the Gospels is not righteousness for heaven on one side and justice on earth on the other. On earth as it is in heaven, says the most popular Christian prayer, the Son of Man is Son of God. There is no God here, man there, and the earth below, the spiritual and the celestial at the one side, and the material and political at the other, time now and eternity later. The individual isolated, or the collectivity undifferentiated. He was neither a political liberator nor a world-denying ascetic, and much less a member of the clergy, but just a being. We have no other word, living the fullness of humanness, which includes the sharing of the divine, revealing thus what we are called upon to become. Once again, Christ as a mere God, even if exclusive Son of God, does not convince. He did not step down from the cross. Christ is not the God of history, a mere man for others. A historical hero and wonderful model does not help either. If once in a while David is lucky, innumerable more times is Goliath the victor. Where do all revolutions lead us to? The struggle for justice is not justified by a prospective victory, once again linear time, but because it is our human vocation for the lokasamgraha, upholding of the universe. Would I dare say jumping on to another tradition, Bhagavad Gita 3:20 and 25. In other words, if the mystery of Christ is not our own mystery, if our Christology is not more than archaeology of the past or eschatology of the future, we better leave it as a museum piece. The cry for a new spirituality is a cry of the Spirit, and it is this Spirit which is the very Spirit of Christ according to tradition. The Christology of the third millennium cannot be sectarian, nor a mere consolation for believers. The Son of Man died outside the holy city. The within, we are timidly suggesting, is the inmost depth of all of us, the abyss where in every one of us the infinite and the finite meet, the material and the intellectual, the cosmic and the divine. The Christianness of the third millennium is called upon to undergo this experience. Divine recognition, pratyabhijna. H.N. Chakravarti. It is known to everybody that the divine remains abiding in everything, sentient and insentient, but on account of some veil we are unable to conceive it in the beginning. But when we hear about its glory and greatness, its nobleness and graceful nature from the mouth of a reliable and competent person who has some definite knowledge regarding its sublime nature, we become eager to approach him, knowing definitely that the divine is the most lovable, is dear of all dears, the summum bonum of all aims. The supreme aim of human life is first to realize, later to relish the love of the divine in multifarious ways. Recognition is the sure path to realize one's identification with the divine. The common people do not have sufficient knowledge regarding the concept of Pratyabhijna, the central concept of the philosophy also called Kashmir Shaivism, originally propagated by Utpaladeva. Therefore, it is relevant to throw some light on it. The idea is mostly illustrated by presenting an example of how recognition occurred in the life of a lost prince. The prince was taken away by some robbers when he was a small baby. He was reared up by some, looked after by some others. After a few years, when he grew up to be a young man, he was identified by some ministers as the lost prince. He was brought before the king, and without disclosing to him his real identity, he had been entrusted with some responsible duties to perform with the purpose of getting him well trained in performing the duties of the king perfectly. When he became excellently ripe, the real identity is revealed to him in the beginning in a general way, that he belongs to a noble family, but later it is disclosed to him that he was the son of a king. Then it was furthermore brought to his knowledge that he was the son of the particular king in whose presence he was just standing. Thus he was brought face to face to the noble lord of the domain. In this way he recognized himself as the prince. This is a simple case of recognition which begins with recognition in a general way, but later all the specific attributes belonging to him as his essential nature follow one after the other in a sequence, only to fill the bowl which as it were remained empty so long on account of separation from the Lord. In the spiritual literature, the aspirant's way to the divine is described as a journey. The course the aspirant follows has a number of voids, therefore he has to encounter these voids, which are comparatively extensive than the one left behind. The aspirant feels within that they are nothing but chasms, gaps between the Lord and him. The aspirant aspires to cross the void, a gap between the lover, the devotee himself, and the beloved, the divine itself. As the journey continues, the gap seems to the devotee as if bridged. As this process continues, the devotee experiences satisfaction to some extent. This is known as Madharapaka, gradual fulfillment of the inner being, but it is to be noted here that direct realization or recognition does not occur all at once to all, irrespective of comparative acquirement of competency. Because the nature of seekers varies, some are well advanced in spirit with purity of innate essence. Because of the purity of the innate nature, some are bestowed grace by the Lord immediately, but for others, the path of intuitive judgment is to be followed. It is a wide path along which one can proceed. This is the path of knowledge with the characteristic of right form of reasoning, satarka. It is known to scholars that tarka, the path of argument, fails to lead a person to achieve a solid ground. The sutra in Vedanta, Tarka says that argument is unstable because it is refuted by counter-arguments and so on. For this reason, Tarka is to be discarded. But we also know that Tarka is an efficient method which makes unification between two things possible, between one and the other. It is a sure link, a bridge which connects two entities. Malinevijaya Tantra defines yoga thus. Wise people like to define yoga as a unity of one entity with the other. Not only that, it serves as a staircase by which one leaves that which is to be rejected and embraces the one which is to be accepted. Therefore, in the Upanishad, Tarka has been praised as a sure means for anusandhana, a method of unification. It has further been stated in Shaivism that Tarka is the best limb of yoga. By the right application of the right form of reasoning, one is able to discern the right from the wrong. We live in the world of isolation, separate from one another by creating walls of distinctions of fame and riches, of position and status, and we live in the island of the ego, ahamkara. But when by the grace of Guru we are able to see the light which unifies all, brings all in the embrace of the divine, we realize oneness, the singleness of light within. In order to see the light, we do not require to go further. It is near, it is everywhere, but first of all, we should realize the light, recognizing it to be the very essence of me, as I. Then it occurs to the aspirant that everything is made of that light. It has emerged from it, is made of it. To realize that everything that is known is idam, the object, is really Brahman, but differentiation, the variousness, the visions, the nanatva is unreal. The reality is one singleness, but multifariousness is also real, which shows itself by the dynamic pulsation of the divine, dancing in the rhythmic play of delight. The divine is nothing but kamait karait karasa, the one harmonious uniflavoredness of the experience of joy. So the delight of the divine does not reject anything but unifies, brings all together, if there is really anything separate from it. The real nature of the divine is not at all static but dynamic, by the energy of which he embraces all in one integral cognition, akandamarsha, but it expands itself and contracts. Expansion, prashara, is the nature of immanence of the divine, and contraction, samkocha, is transcendence. Both are true. When we are able to recognize his transcendent nature, we only traverse as if half of the journey. Unless we are capable of seeing or realizing with the light of recognition that everything is composed of the light, we fail to achieve the highest goal. The highest goal only becomes complete when the two halves meet in unison, in full equilibrium, in the union of Shiva and Shakti, the unity of the dynamic with the static. We know of Uma's penance for obtaining Shiva as her beloved husband. Shiva appeared before her in the disguise of a brahmacharin, a celibate, to bless her with boons. She was unable to recognize him as Shiva himself and rejected all the boons bestowed on her. But as soon as the real recognition as to the reality of Shiva dawned forth in her, she was beyond all delights. When real recognition as to the divine nature of the devotee occurs, one feels within a state of unsteadiness indicating movement and cessation of movement. It cannot be indicated by the term movement nor the absence of movement. It is beyond movement, and yet movement infinite. Movement in the core of rest, while in rest it is on the move infinitely. The Shaiva doctrine looks into the reality as having three aspects. It is composed of three principles known as Nara, Shakti, and Shiva, the object, the dynamic instrument, and the supreme. The object in general is known as Nara. The gross object, the instrument of knowledge, and the limited subject come under Nara. The Shakti is a link between Nara, the object, and Shiva, the supreme subject. Therefore, it is essential that the limited subject, for the purpose of unification with the Supreme, should take recourse to Shakti, which alone is capable of leading the limited self to attain Shiva nature. As in Christian spirituality, the Trinity is the basic principle, so is Trika in Kashmir Shaivism. It is stated that God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit are the three units of the single body of the One. Every being is in essence made of the love of Christ the Son. The indwelling Spirit, consciousness in essence, leads the being to approach the Lord. For without the help of the awakened Shakti, real recognition is impossible. Therefore, realizing this truth, Utpala the saint, assuming the role of the Guru, states in the beginning of the Pratyabhijna Karikas, by means of revealing the dynamic power, this doctrine of recognition is presented. IPK 1:3. The Supreme Divine is eternally abiding in every atom of existence in the form of action, knowledge, and bliss as an integral unity, embracing all in one, and is still beyond them. Though permeating all beings, the hidden Gudatma One does not reveal itself. The question that suffers the soul of the seeker is, why is it that the one who is the soul of everything does not reveal itself to him? Putting this question, the devoted seeker gives the answer himself. There is within me the tiniest dark spot that keeps you hidden, completely wiping away even that. Reveal, O Lord, your spotless form. Shiva Stotravali 13:2. The great Lord composed of imperishable body, embracing the whole world, consisting of the bliss of nectar of eternal consciousness. Chitsudara Samaya remains unattainable so long as the grace of the Lord does not touch the inner self. Only when the grace touches the ardent soul, then the road opens to the view of the seeker, which leads him from the illusory to empirical, and from empirical to the eternal existence of infinite bliss of one's own. According to Pratyabhijna doctrine, every being is in essence perfectly free, paripurna svatantra, and blissful. It is the perfect equilibrium of knowledge and activity, but on account of the veiling and delusive power of Maya, the pure light, the real nature of the Lord remains out of reach. Only those on whom the grace of the divine has dawned can realize what their real nature is. Ayatadurda, Shakti Patasya. The principal requisite for bestowing good to others is the recognition of one's own nature, that it is none else than divinity, the most auspicious Shiva. When one is able to recognize Shiva to be one's own self, one attains the state of the Supreme Godhead. This Supreme Self is unlimited light, possessing all transcending power, which leads the seeker to attain the highest of human goals. The doctrine as presented in the Pratyabhijna Karikas by Utpaladeva, and a detailed exposition of it has been given by Sri Abhinavaguptacharya in two of his commentaries. The one long and the other a little shorter is the source of the present paper. Pratyabhijna is ordinarily translated in English as recognition, a kind of direct perception of the one which was once directly known, but on account of the play of deluding power called Maya, is forgotten, but it is cognized again, as if face to face. Shamukhyana. The term Pratyabhijna has been analytically defined by Sri Abhinavagupta in the commentary called Vimarasini in the following way. Recognition is a knowledge of the light as facing the self reversely. IPV, page 19. The above definition contains three components, prati, abhi, and jna, which mean prati, towards, abhi, face-to-face, and jna means knowledge. The whole sentence then means direct knowledge of one's own self face-to-face. Manifestation of one's own self is not a new experience, which was not experienced before, for the light, the real essence of the self, is an unbroken light. Sakrit vibato yamatma. It shines once and remains shining eternally, but the power which is inseparably united with it creates in the unbroken flow of light an illusion of cleavage, a break as it were, which shows itself in the form of vikalpa, determinate knowledge. Because of this, the notion of vikalpa makes its appearance in the form that this is of this character, not of this. Idam itam nanitam. But when real pratyabhijna shines forth, it is the unification of experiences of what appeared before, Basamanarupanus Sandanatmika. This unification of experiences is the very life of Pratyabhijna or Pratyabhijna itself. In the spiritual tradition of India, three stages regarding the journey of the seeker for truth are generally accepted. The first is Prabodhana, real awakening. It is followed by Samukhya, coming face to face with the Lord. Then the stage of Sambodhana, addressing the Lord as one's own dear. The soul remains overpowered in deep slumber, which in the language of Agama is the state of Pashu or Jiva, with limited knowledge and activity. During the period of slumber, the jiva has little knowledge regarding its real nature. It has no leanings for knowing the truth both of the ultimate and the essence of his own nature. But when the slumber begins to break, the question of what his real nature is arises in his inner soul. Then he feels an urge for knowing the purpose of his existence and the real goal. It is known to all that grace of the Lord does not occur in a person by supplication and prayer, upaya na Shiva Bhakti, but shines only spontaneously. It is a well-accepted view that grace is one of the Lord's 5 functions. Therefore we are unable to show any reason when he will show grace to anybody, as veiling, tirodhana, of his own nature is the play of his. In the same way, anugraha is also another aspect of his functions. Therefore individual initiative is of no value regarding when it will touch the soul. As soon as the fall of grace, anugraha shakti nipata, occurs, it not only purifies the soul of the seeker, but rouses him up from the deep slumber in which he was lying deadly asleep. The awakening of the soul opens to the view of the seeker a new vista along which he will have to approach the beloved. The Malini Vijaya Tantra has described 3 means for absorption in Shiva. By adopting one of these means, the individual is able to attain the ultimate end of life. They are named as Sambhava, Shakta, and Anava. They are denoted by the terms will, knowledge, and activity, respectively. Without taking recourse to any one of them which are directly linked with Shiva, Shaivamukam, it is impossible to have realization of one's true nature. The means called Sambhava is of the nature of Ichcha, will, which implies Pratyabhijna, in which everything, whatever it may be, shines as a reflection in a mirror by the will of the divine. This divine is the support of the bearer of the reflection, which assumes the form of the universe. This implies the immanence of the Lord in creation. This universe is the domain that brings consciousness and manifestation, Chaitanyasya Vyaktishtanam, by means of cognition, Amarsana. In the language of Abhinavagupta, it is speech, vak, or reflected consciousness, or in another word, it is called Paranada, the supreme sound. It eternally pulsates in the transcendental cognition as its essential nature, aham, in the form of I. But those whose understanding is not so refined, and whom the grace of the divine has not touched so keenly, conceive them as bound in the morass of existence. On account of vikalpa, thought constructs, the beings think themselves bound. Because of the presence of these vikalpas, one cannot cross the world of bondage, and remains bound by false views regarding the world and the self. Thought constructs are the play of matrakas, syllabic sounds, which go on creating thoughts or concepts. They are ever engaged in veiling the real nature of beings. It is stated in the Spandakarika thus: the powers are ever in readiness to conceal his own nature, for without the association of words, ideas cannot arise. It seems relevant to say that thought constructs are of 2 types. The one is impure, which is the source of bondage, but the other is pure, which really is the dynamic energy of the Supreme. When it is known rightly by the seeker, it leads one to attain the highest end of one's life. Therefore, one must get rid of impure vikalpas by sowing the seeds of pure vikalpas. One should approach a teacher, Sadguru. It is from him that he is able to know about the truth. Then he further confirms his right understanding by studying the texts. The order that he follows is the teacher, then the scriptures, and finally one's own intuition, guruta from guru, shastrata from texts. svata, from one's own intuitive knowledge. It is only by his intuitive judgment, satarka, that one can ascertain the real nature of the things and is able to discern what is to be rejected and which should be accepted. The impure vikalpas are the forces standing in opposition to those of pure vikalpas, but the latter are able to uproot those vikalpas, which put the soul enticed with the worldly existence. The path the awakened soul treads on along the journey to his goal has certain stages of spiritual development. In the beginning, it starts when the seeker receives the grace of the teacher, Guru Kirpa. Then follows the disciple's competency in consulting the agamic texts, which contain material that is really helpful for understanding the truth. It is quite relevant to say that real conviction regarding the truth does not arise or shine forth until it spontaneously manifests in one's own nature, svata. The text shows to him the vision of recognition indirectly and guides his understanding to grasp the truth following the five-formed syllogism. The text beginning with Katham Sita Sadhya and so on is a statement about recognition. It is a summary of the subject matter. Udesha, the mind portion of the work, states the reasons, Hetvadi, and the last verse, Iti praktito maya, thus I have shown, etc., is the conclusion. Thus the work, that is, a text like the Ishvara Pratyabhijna Karika, which presents the subject matter in a syllogistic form, including 5 terms, serves as a means of recognition to instruct others, and that is its object. The doctrine named Pratyabhijna is a unique spiritual tradition. It is a path that leads everyone to realize the divine within one's own being. It is not only a means, upaya, but at the same time it is the ultimate end, upeya. Everybody can embrace it whether one has earned competency, adhikara, or not. Utpaladeva, the author of the doctrine, being so graceful to the mortal world, plunged in the sea of troubles, utters in the same strain of the Vedic seers for delivering good to the people. Let all the sons of immortality listen. These celestial abodes were well established in you. After realizing recognition, Utpaladeva, the divine teacher, in order to shower grace to the world, says, having somehow realized my identity with the Supreme, and wishing to render service to humanity, I am establishing self-recognition, which is a means of attaining all that is of value. IPK 1:1. This opening verse of Pratyabhijna Karika contains some very meaningful words. Jana Sapyupaka Paramichan. After realizing his identity with the divine, the author feels an urge within to deliver it to the world. He takes up the method of bestowing it by means of prakya and then upakya. First realizing the light of the divine in himself, he wants to bestow it to others by means of reflected consciousness, by placing those who pass from one existence to the other, jhana, near Samipam, the Lord, in order that they may attain the nearness of all the good belonging to the Lord, Parameshvara Dharma Samitpatakaranam. That is, they are given the pure nectar or essence in such a way that they may realize oneness with the divine essence, knowledge and activity abiding inseparably with the Lord. According to the doctrine, whatever shines is the divine in essence. The objects that appear as jar externally and that shine as pleasure or pain internally, when seen in their essence, they are nothing but light, but it is quite relevant to mention here that this light is not simply a light that floods everything and then obliterates, but it is such a light that not only makes the body of all appear as one's own body, but it pulsates as the life of everything. Everything shines as composed of the light. Everything that is manifest is simply his glory. Sarvamamayam Vibhava, it is an all-pervasive light, encompassing all, which unifies all with the divine by demolishing the barrier of separation. Abhinavagupta states the fundamental insight in his commentary, which we may summarize thus. The inner life, which is called Pashu and is referred to as I, is not different from the Supreme Self, who is essentially the light of consciousness, grasping both the subject and the object. On the contrary, I am the transcendental being, and he is I. There is no difference between the two. For the real seeker of the truth, Anusandhana, unification of everything as one, and viewing all as an integral unity of the light of consciousness, is a process which certainly leads one to attain the greatness of Shiva. He gives in his commentary in a nutshell how the process of unification occurs. The category of earth cannot exist without the category of water, for it is in the medium of firm support, dirti only, that solidarity is found. All these realities are simply nothing without Bhairava, who is absolutely autonomous and the very quintessence of perfect light. Jaideva Singh, page 117. In other words, the recognition of supreme consciousness is an easy approach for the attainment of the true self. It is stated with emphasis that only by means of inquiry, anvisana, into the source of prama, the light of consciousness which lends its light to the distinctly manifest objects like blue and pleasure, one is able to attain the supreme consciousness. Therefore, Sri Abhinavagupta writes, the attainment of the true self is possible only through close unification of right knowledge regarding well-manifest objects like blue and pleasure and so on. IPV 1:1. The limited form of knowledge shines as separated from the all-inclusive light of the Lord. Thus the limited one gets its fulfillment even though it rests in the source, the very light. But for the limited soul, the act of swinging from this, idam, to I, aham, always continues, resting in the object and later in the subject, touching the two ends first in the objective level and next in the level of the subject. The rest, Vishranti, at the level of the object is relative, while the rest that occurs at the level of the subject is relative cum absolute. With the attainment of the light absolute, Paramarthika, which is an unbroken continuum, everything then shines as composed of light. But on account of the will of the Lord, a cleavage shows itself within that single one, with the result that this first appears very indistinctly, then it shines distinctly as if completely separate from the light, the mainspring of everything, but aham, that is I, remains all the time linked with the object. Thus truth remains veiled to the view of the limited consciousness, but as soon as the truth is realized even for a moment, or in other words, when the glimpse of recognition dawns in a soul, he feels all at once that the object he sees, the delicacy he feels, the sweet sound he hears, is nothing but the manifestation of the light of consciousness, and he himself is shining within that Nijantaragatam. It is also stated in the text, all the appearances, abhashas, are essentially of the nature of consciousness, so they always exist internally. IPK 187. The manifestations have their existence in the light of consciousness of the universal subject. Whether they be in the state of internality or externality, they are essentially of the nature of consciousness. IPV 187. In the language of the devotee, we may say that, though the Supreme Lord is abiding very near, we are unable to realize him until we attain the true insight. The devotee knows rightly what he really is, so he states with conviction, O Lord of the gods, you are an object of incessant worship by the great ones, but are yourself a worshipper. Here in this world you are an object of vision from both within and without, but are yourself a seer. Shivastotravali 425. Though Utpaladeva was a staunch non-dualist, he was also a true bhakta, devotee, who always tread along the path of delightful devotion, bhakti par excellence. It is such a state which is an equilibrium of both devotion and knowledge. Devotion is nothing but enjoyment of the highest bliss of absorption in multifarious ways, which dissolves all obstacles on one hand, and on the other makes the devotee worthy to realize the great Brahman everywhere and in every situation. Therefore, with the consciousness of the true essence of things, that emanates from the removal of the obstacles to the nectar of your non-duality, make me worthy, O Lord of the gods, of the worship of your feet. Shivastotravali 12.5. Sri Abhinavagupta defines bhakti as absorption in the highest bliss, paramanadavesha, by the force of which the devotee realizes brahmasata, the presence of Brahman in every state, sharvasvavastashu. Absorption, samavesa, in the Supreme is really devotion, which does not at all tarnish non-duality, but adds brightness to it. Regarding the three stages referred to above that the aspirant has to pass through, these are prabodhana, awakening of the soul. It occurs only through descent of grace, followed by the offering of initiation by the spiritual teacher, Sadguru. It is then followed by Shamukhya of the aspirant, which means that the aspirant realizes face to face the glory of the Lord. This is not all. When the aspirant experiences the delightful union with the Lord, he feels an anguish for quenching his thirst for nectar over and over again. It is termed as a great festivity, Pujana Mahotsava, where meditation goes on spontaneously. The truth is meditated upon without the aid of verbal media. It continues in the core of the heart as reflection of light in a clear mirror. This meditation has been given a very clear exposition in the Tantra Loka. The light is self-manifest and is perfectly free. It is in essence pure consciousness and abides steadily in the heart. Though every category is composed of it, yet his meditation is to be performed in the recess of the heart. The knower of the truth perceives the Lord in the inner sanctum of the heart. Tantra Loka 5:20 through 21. The author clarifies the view with the simile of the flower of the plantain tree. As the outer covers of the flower, when peeled off, one after the other, the flower inside makes its appearance. In the same way, the seeker of the truth should delve deep after removing the outer coverings, which are nothing but all the principles, some gross and some subtle. Then he is able to stand face to face or directly realize the effulgent light of the Lord. If we are allowed to follow the karma, the sequence may be as follows. Let there be that great festival of worship where the Supreme Lord himself is meditated upon, seen, and touched. Be always mine through your grace. Shiva Stotravali 13.6. The order that is seen in the journey of the aspirant is jhana meditation in the beginning. At the ripeness of meditation, the vision of the Divine Beloved makes its appearance. This vision is real, not a creation of the mind. The eager look of the devotee sees at a distance a glimpse of the divine, and he is keen to have his vision in the core of the heart. This vision of the Beloved makes the aspirant assured that the day is not far away where he will be able to embrace him. The eyes of the devoted speak of this by his compassionate look. At this stage he goes on looking constantly at him. By the words Dersyate Svayam, the Supreme Lord gives his own vision without any external aids. Then occurs the ultimate contact. This is indicated by the word Spersyate, touched. All these steps occur by the grace of the Lord, not outside, but in the void of consciousness, Chitakasha. When the stage that becomes manifest to the devotee now is that of the relation of thou and I, the devotee is then able to address his beloved as thou, that is, in the second person. Though there is the absence of duality at this stage, yet separateness remains manifest so long as a total merging does not come about. The devotee always likes to maintain his separateness, a sort of distance from the Lord, in order to relish bliss with its numerous facets, until the bowl of emptiness becomes completely full. According to the Shaiva doctrine of Kashmir, devotion has not been given so much importance as we find it in the Vaishnava tradition. The Vaishnavas are regarded by the Advaita Shaivas as established in the lower level of spiritual development, for to them bhakti is only an attachment, raga, and as such it leads them to attain a certain stage, not the ultimate. But to Utpaladeva, bhakti is a great treasure. Those who are richly endowed with the blessing of devotion do not require anything for their need. It is known as parabhakti, the sublime form of devotion. It flourishes in the aspirant. When he attains steadiness in devotion, that is, when proper maturity in the realization of the non-dual nature of the Lord occurs, he feels himself the real recipient of everything that the Master showers on him. Dhyate asmai shravam. Sri Abhinavagupta also does not lag behind when he speaks of devotion with high spiritual fervor thus: Now I, who am your devotee, having become transformed into you, am as if composed of your essence. On seeing you or realizing you as my own self, I pay obeisance to you and me over and over again. Mahopadesha Vimsatika 5.4. These quotes definitely stand as a sound proof that thinkers like Utpaladeva and Sri Abhinavagupta did not hold any disparaging views regarding bhakti. Rather, it adds brightness and beauty to the tenet of non-duality. Following the text of Pratyabhijna, I shall now proceed to explain how divine recognition is transmitted to others. It is well known to the people in general that the spiritual teacher guides the disciple by giving him initiation so that he may proceed along the noble path leading to liberation. Knowledge of the highest kind is transmitted to the disciple, by whose power the latent impression lying in him is destroyed, and after the fall of the body he attains Shivahood. This, in short, is the description of the formal type of initiation, but as the nature or the innate characteristic of every human being differs, initiation and spiritual practice which follows it also differ. Therefore, for some Satarka, the right form of judgment is the means by which paves the way for the person of ripe intuition and acumen of intelligence to realize the noble truth by himself, svata. But it should be remembered here that before proceeding along the path, it is essential that he should first of all receive a glimpse of the divine by the kindness of the teacher. It is quite relevant here to state how direct knowledge of the divine recognition arises in the disciple. Sri Abhinavagupta says that the teacher, who has already attained identity with the divine, is endowed with all the glories of the Lord. He is the embodied form of Shiva himself. He is said to be the Bimba, the source or original image, while the domain of the heart of the disciple, which has become perfectly pure like the mirror, is capable of receiving the light as reflection, pratibimba. The analogy that is used in this context is called bimba pratibimba nyaya, the analogy of the source and the reflection. The source, bimba, is one, but the reflections may be many. Therefore, the teacher representing bimba is able to bestow good to many. The doctrine of Pratyabhijna is a means, upaya, to attain liberation or revelation of one's own Shiva nature. It is a means by which recognition comes about. It is the way leading to the ultimate goal, which is also known as recognition. Recognition, as such, may be called the penultimate goal, which terminates in the manifestation of Lordship with all his glory as a single light in one's own being. Ordinary people do not have any knowledge regarding its nature and about the goal to which it leads. If they hear by chance that a person who has realized his identity with the Supreme, the most desirable of all desires, and established his recognition, is desirous of doing good to all troubled with birth and death, and bestow grace to them, the final release becomes assured to them. They receive recognition as reflection reflected from the original source. The sure knowledge of the fact makes them aware of the truth in the first stage, but as soon as they become intent on taking the course of recognition, they reach the second stage. In this stage, they imagine themselves free from the limitations of time. The third stage manifests itself when they realize the steady recognition of perfection in their own nature. This process has been indicated by the grammatical terms third and first person. The meaning denoted by the term third person terminates in the meaning denoted by the first person, IPV, verse 1, page 27. In the above way, we have tried to give a summary view of the doctrine of recognition. It is relevant to say something regarding the nature of satarka, the right type of judgment. The system known as pratyabhijna is not a text of logic, though it involves some arguments and counter-arguments, only to help the seeker of the truth to stand steadily on the stable ground of conviction, free from doubts and misconception. The author presents the doctrine of recognition by bringing to view, that is, in the sphere of perception, the power of Dirk and Kriya, knowledge and action, which are inseparably united with the Lord, so that taking recourse to them one is able to recognize one's own self. When finally the devotee realizes recognition, he feels that everything shines in the light of the divine as one with it. Being self-luminous, you cause everything to shine. Delighting in your form, you fill the universe with delight. Rocking with your own bliss, you make the whole world dance with joy. Shiva Stotravali 13:15.